Hi guys, welcome to your last lecture. It's finally week 10. We've made it through. I just wanted to start out by saying that I was very excited to have the opportunity to work with you guys this semester. I learned a lot from all of you, and I hope that you were able to learn a lot from me. I appreciate your participation on the discussion boards and sharing your insights and also your experiences at your co-ops or in your jobs. A lot of you are at different levels, whether you're a student or whether you're already working full-time and a student or you've done a few co-ops. So we had a lot of different levels here in the class, and I think it worked out well with the undergraduates and graduates working together. So I really appreciate all your efforts in doing that. And like I've said, I've enjoyed reading your responses and just getting to know what you think. And I'm glad that a lot of you felt comfortable disagreeing with some of the articles or proving a point about a certain document. That's really what this field is about. We're trying to make documents more usable, more effective, and to do that, you really have to be willing to question the document and even question authors of documents. So I'm going to cut off here and then head into the lecture using Screencast-O-Matic. You'll be using that to record your presentations as well. So I'm going to link a video on how to use it, but for the most part, it's pretty user-friendly. Give it a dry run and you should be good with it. But if you need that tutorial, I'll link one because a lot of them already exist online, or you can find one in a text format if you prefer. But it's been great working with you this quarter, and I wish all of you the best of luck in your futures. Hey guys, now we're going to kick off the week 10 lecture. Hopefully I was able to splice these videos together. The first recording I did for the PowerPoint did not record, so this is my second attempt at it later in the day. So fingers crossed that this one actually saves. I want to go over what we've discussed over the past couple of weeks. So I want to start off with document design and some of the main ideas that we covered. So one of the most important ones is the Gestalt theories. And I'm talking about things like contrast, figure ground contrast, grouping, those sorts of principles that we had discussed and that you used for evaluating different types of documents. And next I want to talk about visual culture. We didn't get to talk about this in class as much as I would have liked to. You could really do an entire course just on visual culture. But I do want to bring your attention to poster number 8 that was in our shared drive. And the reason for this is because that poster relates a lot to visual culture. I know some of you had chosen that poster to discuss in some of our discussion board items, and it's the one that's for a play at the Wilma Theater, and there are images all over it. It looks a little bit crazy. It's actually relying on visual culture. It's relying on the reader or user to recognize that it's actually different aspects of British humor. So one that Americans may recognize is Monty Python. I'm not sure if younger generations anymore would recognize that, but for a while that was popular in the US. So it's something that a passerby may recognize, and then it draws them into the rest of the poster. However, a lot of the other things that are referenced on the poster aren't familiar to people in the US. It's really more for a British audience. So what that poster is trying to do is to bring people in with the Monty Python bit, but then there's also these other aspects. So maybe if they brought them in with Monty Python, the person will assume, well, I thought Monty Python was funny, therefore I may think these other things are funny. So I just wanted to mention that with visual culture because we really didn't get to spend as much time as I would have liked talking about that. Next is visual rhetoric, and that we talked about the rhetor, or the person that's doing the convincing. We talked about audience and user. We talked about ethos and how important that is for the company or the client that you would be working with. We talked about logos, like when they're using statistics to try to win over the reader. And we talked about pathos, which is more of the emotional appeal. So with that, you can think of charities, different things like that. And then we talked about readability. And for that, we really centered on readability formulas. And I love that you guys read through them and made your own opinions. That's great. I think that's what you have to do. I don't think that readability formulas can stand alone, but I think they have some value as a starting off point if you really have no idea how to estimate maybe like a reading grade level. So that can be useful, but of course it's not foolproof, and there's lots of other things we have to consider, like psychology. How is the person reading? How are they understanding the information? And for that, there's that overlap with the fields like psychology, communications. So you have to have a background in both, I think, to understand what the user is experiencing when they read. And then last is Koselnick's visual matrix. And this is really great as a planning tool. So if you used it almost as a checklist while you were designing a document, you would make sure that you're hitting all the points. What size margins do I want? What size paper am I printing on? What texture of paper? Am I printing business cards that need to be a bit more sturdy that I hand out? Am I printing out just a sample report that I need in a hard copy and I can just use 8.5 by 11? Or am I printing something like a brochure where I need to have some sort of folding, whether it's a trifold or more or less some other option where you would do folding. So that's great as a planning tool. And again, these are all things that you can put in your toolbox when you're designing documents. Now, I want to go into usability testing next, and that's really been our focus the second half of this quarter. And we explained what usability testing is. I think we've all learned that. We've all conducted ours so far. Who it involves: it's you as the person designing the test, it's note takers, it's observers, it's the people taking the test for you and giving their consent to be tested. And we learned how to list what we want to achieve. What are you hoping to gain out of the test? What's going to be the benefit? When you're working at a corporate company, they always want to know what's the benefit to them, and they'd like to usually know it in dollars. So you can tell them about enhancing the usability, and if products and documents are more usable, then people call support less, they have an easier time figuring out their own problems, and that's usually the kind of stuff that they would like to hear. We talked about what methods and performance objectives we used. So what is successful completion? Are we saying successful completion is if I completed the project correctly or the task correctly? Or is it that I completed the task in a certain amount of time? There's different objectives that you want to meet, and those tend to vary by what you decided in your test plan. So, and then what we needed to develop, that was the test plan. You guys have all submitted a draft of that, and I'll be looking at that in the next couple of days and giving you some feedback. Then you also had to decide what data to collect, and the two main types of data are qualitative and quantitative. So qualitative having to do more with words, and maybe you use the Think Aloud protocol, and that's where you got the language from, so you were writing down what the user was saying as they were being tested. And then we have quantitative, which is numbers based, and that could be timing the person to completion. It could be giving them a post-survey question, asking them how satisfied they were and giving them a scale. There's lots of different ways that you can quantify your data. If it's purely qualitative, that can be a little bit more difficult to analyze. And especially with quantitative, you can put together those nice charts that people like to see in reports. So it's definitely something that you should strive for, but definitely don't force it into a test if it doesn't work. And then what the end result is. So you may or may not take action depending on what your results of the test were. You may not have the funds to do it. You might decide that not everything needs to be done. We talked about critical and non-critical items. So critical is something that's actually preventing the user from going forward, whereas non-critical is something that it's considered a nice to have. And it's something that it could wait a couple of releases. If you're dealing with software, they might put it off for a year and say, okay, it's on our backlog, but it's not the top priority. I also want to touch a little bit on test reports, and I'm just seeing now that my glasses are glaring pretty badly. Sorry about that. I can never tell when they are unless I'm watching the box in the corner, which I wasn't this time. For test reports, I want to bring you back to the Barnum examples that we have in the course documents folder. Those are the best samples to look at. There's, I believe, 3 or 4 samples in that folder, and take a look at the results of the usability tests that were performed for those, and you should model your project after that. And then we also have the guidelines document that's in the folder, so make sure to double check and make sure that you're meeting all the guidelines. You really want to focus on the organization of your report, because don't forget that this was a document design course, so you want to make sure that your report is properly formatted as a report. So that means table of contents, it means headers, it means appendices, all that stuff. So make sure that you're following a proper format and make sure that it's consistent. I also want to make sure that you add in your text focused and, well, aside from user focused, expert focused testing. So experts in this case is you guys. It's communication professionals that are starting out, and you gave an analysis of what you thought. On some of your projects, I may have commented, this is good, but save it until the last section. So that's where I want you to bring that back in. Hopefully that siren's not picking up on my audio, but sorry if it is. I really want you to bring everything together in the end of it. And then for text focus, you may have chosen something like doing a spell check on the website. Maybe you took a couple of the web pages, put them in Word, and did a check for grammar and punctuation. Whatever you worked with, and you want to put those results in there, especially like if you found situations where there were typos, and they're not maybe critical items that you need to fix, but they're non-critical, and they're things that affect a company's ethos if you have that many errors over time. At a minimum, your report definitely needs to include an analysis and recommendations. So absolutely make sure that you're not submitting it without those 2 sections. Those are key to the report. And then for information or data that you collected, you should plan to supply that information when it would help me understand how you got to your results. So in most cases, I would strongly advise you to attach your data in some way, whether it's in a table in a report, depending on how many tasks and users you have, or if it's attaching it and putting it as an appendix. But you really want to make sure that you're giving me enough data to understand what you were testing and to understand why you reached the conclusions that you did, because if there's a piece missing and I can't really understand how you arrived at that conclusion, it would help me to see your data and say, okay, well, they had 4 users that said almost the exact same thing, and that's where they drew this conclusion from. So my recommendation is to attach the data. Of course, if you find another way to present it or summarize it, that's perfectly fine, but definitely make sure that you have everything available that needs to be available. And then last but not least, we have my contact information. So you already know my name, and my position, other than being an adjunct for Drexel this quarter, is technical writer. My areas of expertise and interest are accessibility, translatability, and usability. If you ever have questions about being a technical writer or being a professional writer, feel free to reach out to me with any questions. I can't always help with other industries, but I can certainly advise in the case of technical writing, and specifically in the greater Philadelphia area. So if there's anything I can do to help out, certainly let me know. You've had my email since my Drexel email hasn't worked for a long time, and I just included this lovely picture as well of my good friend Riggs, who is apparently going to be driving a car soon. and he's just a reminder to have a little happy image for your last week of classes and as you're approaching finals. As I said in the beginning of the video, it's been great working with all of you and hearing your ideas. I certainly enjoyed myself this quarter, and I learned a lot from you guys, and I hope you learned a lot as well. Looking forward to your projects, and as always, email me, discussion board, anything you can text me to. Any questions that you have on the project, feel free to reach out to me. For due dates, that's important. For the presentations, you're going to need to have them posted by the 7th. As I post this video, I'm going to open up the board for that. And I decided to push back the report due date until this Sunday. So that'll give you guys a couple extra days to play around with formatting and finalizing everything. Like for your presentation, you definitely need to have your report mostly done and analyzed, and obviously your suggestions, but I'm going to give you a few more extra days if you need it to just run through the formatting, make sure you're checking spelling, make sure that your TOC is working right, all that good stuff. And that will be it for the quarter. So make sure that as groups are posting their videos, you're going in and you're watching and you're leaving a comment. That part is required for your participation. So make sure that you watch everyone's video and just leave a little comment on what their results were or something that you learned in their presentation. All right, guys, thanks so much. And thanks for a great quarter. Bye, guys.